Hello, my name is John Smithin, and I'm the research director of the Aurora Philosophy Institute here in Aurora, Ontario, Canada. I'm going to make a video this evening, actually. I was going to say today, but it's evening. Um, and It's essentially called Notes on the Frankfurt School, and I explain why I'm going to do that in a few minutes. Just before we get into that, I should just remark that I've made several videos today, actually, five or six of them, and I'm playing them back on various subjects, and some on my own and some with other people. And playing them back, I noticed that I've developed an annoying habit of playing with or fiddling with my new beard. So that's something that's newly happened to me, and I kind of have to avoid it. I don't think we can go back and re-record all those things from earlier today. Just have to live with it. But apologies in advance if I revert to doing that. Okay, this is something new that I have to get used to. Yeah, excuse me. The purpose of this video is that our API associate, our friend Ted Kennedy, is going to lead a discussion about the philosophy of the Frankfurt School uh, um, at the Philosophy Cafe. That's one of our regular sort of meetings, one of our regular events, taking place in January 2025. It's still the month of December now, so this is an advance. And the purpose of this video is just to uh, provide some notes to give some of the background for this discussion. Now, in the Coping with Realities series uh, that was put on by the API last fall and winter, Ronan Grunberg and I, John Smithin, um, started to discuss what I would describe as a rather different idea of the concept of justice to what has usually been thought of as fair. This alternative idea to the traditional meaning of fair is namely social justice. And here the emphasis is squarely on the adjective of this phrase rather than the traditional meaning of the noun. Justice is supposed to apply mainly to social groupings based on such things, and I'm being careful here, I'm putting them in alphabetical order: age, class, ethnicity, gender, national origin, physical disability, sexual orientation, religious affiliation, or some other collective attribute. There's much less attention paid to the contribution of each individual to the society as a whole. Now, there are very many similar ideas which have gained currency in the last half century and more, with labels such as, you all know them, political correctness, intersectionality, wokeness, and DEI, which means diversity, equity, and inclusion, and so forth. So the question that Ronan and I, there I touched the beard again. The question that Ronan and I were asking was, how did things get to be this way? Why are these sorts of ideas so popular? Popular, that is, at least in some quarters. Well, in North America, this is to a very large extent the legacy of the so-called cultural Marxism of the Frankfurt School. And in the slide presentation, which I don't have here, we illustrate that with pictures of two very famous figures associated with the Frankfurt School from California in the 1960s. These were Herbert Marcuse and Angela Davis. Now, Marcuse was Davis's PhD supervisor and mentor at the University of California, San Diego. And the two photographs are quite interesting. There's Marcuse is sitting peacefully somewhere in an academic setting, a tranquil setting, maybe in a garden somewhere or something, smoking a cigar. Angela Davis, very famous political and academic figure, certainly in the 1960s and thereafter, was addressing a very large crowd of protesters at one of the many rallies or protests that existed, particularly took place in California in those years. So we're transferring the cloistered arena of academia into the realm of political action. So what we're suggesting is that these current political ideas that we mentioned are indeed the legacy of the so-called Frankfurt School. How did this happen? I would argue this is that after the First World War, 1914 to 1918, the emphasis in Marxist intellectual circles in Europe shifted away from what we might call classical Marxism, with ideas about the class struggle, workers of the world unite, and so forth, to dealing primarily with social and cultural questions. That's where we get into this idea of social justice and cultural Marxism and so forth. The point is that the workers did not unite in World War I. As a matter of fact, they all joined up enthusiastically to fight for their own nations. They were anti-globalist, to put it into directly modern terms. The October Revolution of 1917 in Russia, which actually took place in November, according to the Gregorian calendar, which is used in the West, did not conform to this classical Marxian blueprint at all. It wasn't an exception to the rule. It didn't conform to the classical Marxist blueprint at all. With, again, modern hindsight, I now think that it was more akin, actually, to the so-called color revolutions of our own time. It was facilitated by foreign nations, specifically the nation that Russia was at war with, Germany, in the time, and it was also facilitated by foreign financing. Again, think of the numerous what are called color revolutions in our own day. In any event, after the First World War, the Marxists, I think, needed to find a new victim class or classes, that they couldn't, as it were, rely on the workers anymore. E.g., racial minorities, women, gay people. As a matter of fact, anyone else they could find and whatever they could think of. So two important early thinkers in this trend were Antonio Gramsci, who lived from 1891 to 1937 in Italy, and Grigory Lukács, who lived from 1885 to 1971 in Hungary. Piero Sraffa, who lived from, excuse me just a moment. Piero Sraffa, who lived from 1898 up until 1983, who was a very close associate of Gramsci, moved to Cambridge University in the 1920s at the invitation of Keynes. And in 1923, the Neo-Marxist Institute for Social Research was founded at Goethe University, Frankfurt. So here we come to the idea of the Frankfurt School. This institute was founded in 1923 and was immediately very successful and quite influential. But when Hitler's National Socialist German Workers' Party, the Nazis in short, came to power in Germany in the 1930s, prominent members of the Frankfurt School, most if not all of whom were Jewish, scholars such as Adorno, Fromm, Horkheimer, and Marcuse himself, were exiled to the USA. Now, there in the USA, the Frankfurt School scholars were very well received. There was a sympathetic hearing in New York, for example, at Columbia University. Also in Washington, D.C., where, for example, during the war, many of those associated with the Frankfurt School actually worked in government service. And of course, in Southern California, via Hollywood and the universities. This is how the ideas came to America. Very important was the role of Herbert Marcuse, who, as we say, lived from 1898 to 1979, who remained in the United States after World War II when his colleagues returned to Germany and eventually retired as a professor at the University of California at San Diego. And Marcuse was particularly important, as we've already hinted, in shaping opinion on the left in America. So there was no doubt a direct influence from the Frankfurt School on the so-called New Left in the United States in the 1960s, famously a period of the rise of a counterculture, if you will. And of course, forward, I mean, I think we can see almost a direct line to many of the political trends and issues of the present day. In Germany and Europe, a later influential member of the school was Jürgen Habermas, who's born in 1929. He's still alive, and has been an influential figure, particularly in the development of the politics of the European Union in Europe. So all I really wanted to do now, so Ted is going to go into, far much more detail and lead a discussion on the influence of this school. What I really wanted to do here was just kind of introduce you to some of the names and some of the historical background and so forth. I hope this has achieved that goal. So thank you very much, and I'll say good night now. Good evening. Thank you.